you opened up this conversation by calling it an unriggable game. And I think those games that aren't riggable, are the only games that are iterable, that actually are playable in a repeated fashion. Because if you can bend, twist, or break the rules of a game, well, then eventually, sort of two things happen, right? One, the power struggle becomes who gets to control the rule-making apparatus. Because if you can control the making of the rules, then you have the power to win every single round of every single game ever played, right? It's like, if we sit down to play poker and I get to decide the hand rankings every hand, well, then you're never going to beat me, right? My pair is going to beat your royal flush if I happen to flop a pair and you happen to flop a royal flush, because I get to decide the rules. So the game,
you get to decide. There's not 52 cards. There's 58, and
exactly.
I got the extra 3 queens, so I win every time.
Right, exactly. And so the game degenerates from, it goes from a game, like a peaceful game, to politics or violence, right? People are just basically fighting over who gets to control that rulemaking apparatus. And well, I guess that's the second thing, basically. One is people fight over the rules, and then two, the game devolves and degenerates and ultimately goes away. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good, like, understanding the game dynamics in that way is a really good lens through which to interpret fiat currency and central banking. It's like every time they print money or freeze your bank account or enforce capital controls or deauthorize a currency note, like, they're changing the rules of the game, right? They're degenerating the game. Mm-hmm. And that's why ultimately these things end in hyperinflation or warfare or both.
Yeah, and it leads to a competency crisis, because I'm not going to become skillful at a game that keeps changing on me. There's no point.
Yeah, what's the point?
I'm just going to try and climb the ladder and be one of the guys that decides the rules. Because then I can decide who the winner is, and I get to be a backroom, the dark architect behind.
Exactly.
So it leads to the shitification of everything.
Yes.
I'm not going to practice and become the world's best at something if that thing is not well defined and it can be changed. Yeah. I'm just not. So there's nothing worse than like trying really hard and playing your best at a game, and then someone says those aren't the rules anymore. Sorry. Like, you might have done really, like, competency crisis is just DEI is the best example of that. Like, I'm really good at my job, but I'm not in a favored group right now. I'm a white male, or I'm heterosexual, or something like that. That says that's not the rule. Like, the game is how much of a trump card can you play in the oppression Olympics, right? Yeah. If you're whatever's in fashion this week, if it's like, if you're this nationality or that sexuality. Right now, it's transgenderism is like the top of the pyramid for like. So I don't care how good you are when you applied for the Olympics opening ceremony to do your art. You obviously weren't chosen. It was a bunch of transgender people, right? Because they're the popular ones right now. Right. So it's not about competency. It's about something else. So if you're the best singer or dancer or something like that, that's not the thing. And that was the game. That's what motivated you to be a good dancer and a good singer or whatever. And you're not going to be where you should be as a result of that. Yeah. And it just leads to like ugly architecture and just no one being good at their job. Everything just becomes crap.
All goods and services degenerate. I mean, it's like, if you're going to have life-saving brain surgery, do you want someone that got there because he performed 10,000 of those surgeries successfully, or do you want someone that got there because they were selected for their race or religion or whatever minority status? It's almost like people have to compete across some dimension for anything, that any role that needs to be filled or anything that's scarce, right? That there's less supply of the thing than there is demand. There's more demand for the thing there is supply, that people need to compete for that. If you're not competing across the dimension of competency, then things just go awry really quickly. Yeah. And that's, you use this analogy to language, and maybe that's a good definition for wokeism. Actually, like, it's an attempted 51% attack on language. They're trying to like force the redefinition of words.
Yeah. Well, this comes back to Bitcoin beautifully, because you have we change the rules every now and again in Bitcoin, right? And you have soft forks and hard forks. Soft forks happen quite often, and they're quite easy to do, because that's the equivalent of adding a new word to English. You can do that, and if it catches on, it catches on. Right. Hard forks, which have been what people attempted to do in 2017 and learned pretty quick that that's basically impossible to do without overwhelming agreement. Yeah. That's redefining a word that already exists and wanting a billion people to be like, okay, that's the new meaning for that word.
That's so good. Hard. Okay, so just to define those things: soft fork, backwards compatible upgrade in Bitcoin, hard fork, non-backwards compatible upgrade.
Exactly. Yeah. So if I try and redefine this chair to be like, oh, chair means something else now, that's really hard to do.
That's hard,
and that's what woke.
Because there's a lot of blocks in the chain going backwards where chair equals chair, right?
Yeah. And you need all these people to agree to break an existing rule that their inertia doesn't allow for.
Right.
Like if like, you know, Dominicans or something want to make a new word and add it to English, they can, and it doesn't affect existing English users.
Yeah.
But if they start literally using this word chair to mean something else, that's really difficult. They actually need us to all cooperate with that change. The analogy is not super watertight.
No, I think it's a pretty strong analogy actually, because when you do get neologisms, new words in English, they're usually driven by technology. Actually, like we were walking on the beach out here one day. My girlfriend grew up in the Netherlands, and she speaks Dutch. She looked at the light tower.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, the lighthouse. I'm already confusing my words. And she called it a fire tower. And apparently in Dutch, that's what they call it. They call it a fire tower. And then we got to thinking about it. I was like, oh, that's because when that word was used in Dutch, there was a fire in that tower. And now when we use it in the US, presumably there was an electrical light in there more recently. So new technology actually drives change in our language, like gives us new words, new phrases and all of these things. And similar would be in Bitcoin, right? Like maybe we get, I don't know, pick an upgrade. Taproot, I guess that was was that a soft fork?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it was. Yeah. You can come up with new ideas come around in cryptography, and you can make people can say, hey, I want a new address type, which will encumber coins with certain conditions.
Right.
Like you can have a coin. A very trivial example is check lock time verify. Right? It's a very old thing that was added to Bitcoin. And it's like I want to put my coins at an address where they can't be spent from that address for a year. And that means I'm immune from $5 wrench attacks for that whole year. Like someone wants to whack me over the head with it, I cannot spend those coins for another 11 months. Like come back then. And if you want, you can, Fort Knox your house for 1 month a year when you move it to the next check lock time verify, right? And this is also useful for creating Sybil resistant cryptographic identities, right? So if you have coin join implementations like join market, that are not Sybil resistant, where the same guy can make 1,000 different offers and you might think they're all different people, that kind of sucks. But you can impose a cryptographic cost to creating each identity and saying, I'm only going to use guys that have locked up 10 Bitcoins in a locked UTXO. That imposes a cryptographic financial cost to doing it, right? So, I mean, when we talk about Sybil resistance, it's the idea that you can just create 1 million identities or 1 million nodes on one Amazon web server or something, for example. Imposing an actual financial cost on that, saying you've got to lock up coins for ages, is super useful. And this is a tangent, but that's how join market it works, right? It's a decentralized coin join implementation rather than Whirlpool from Samurai and Wasabi's Wabi-Sabi protocol. Like those are both centralized, or they were. Wasabi isn't anymore, and Samurai's gone because of the US government.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the idea was decentralize it and make there be a cost to it and leverage what Bitcoin is to impose that cost and, make it, again, unriggable. Like if I lock up a Bitcoin to create a cryptographic identity for join market purposes, there's no unlocking that Bitcoin. I literally cannot access it until the time, it gets played out. And that the amount of time and the amount of size it is, the value of the bond you create, is a function of both how long it is and how much Bitcoin there is. So you can create a very expensive identity, and then people can go, I trust that. Yeah. So super cool concept.
That is so cool. That's definitely going to take that analogy away from this, that soft fork is like adding a new word to English. Hard fork is like trying to break consensus on an existing definition.
Yeah.
And wokeism is very much like trying to hard fork.
Yeah. English my favorite is men can't get periods.
Yeah.
And they can keep telling us that they can, and we can keep laughing at them forever. And they got a couple of years left. They can print money and give it to people that will tell us men can get periods, and that money is not going to work for much longer. It's going to hyperinflate.
Right.
Like it is kind of from money, or it is fiat. Like Bitcoin does fix woke. Like, I like that Microsoft fired their DEI department the other day, and they're like, oh, Trump's going to win. This is a waste of time. And they just fired them. Like, this is great. We're finally seeing the end of this.
And it speaks to that sort of mind control element of money printing, where like not only is it stealing from savers, but it can also be used to manufacture different narratives, right? Of course. Like wokeism, whatever. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.